The station floated in the darkness between stars, a neutral place where different species could meet without fear. Crossroads 7 had seen countless diplomatic missions over its 300 years of existence, but today something unusual was happening. The Galactic Dominion was meeting with humans for the first time. Ambassador Velshara adjusted her ceremonial robes and looked at the creatures sitting across the negotiation table. They were strange beings, these humans. They had only 2 arms, 2 legs, and stood upright on flat feet. Their skin came in various shades of brown and pink, and they had hair growing from the tops of their heads. Their eyes were small, and their teeth were flat, except for 4 slightly pointed ones. They looked harmless, almost weak. The human delegation consisted of 5 individuals. Their leader called herself Ambassador Sarah Martinez. She spoke clearly and politely, requesting trade agreements and formal recognition of human territory. Velshara listened with barely concealed amusement. Human territory consisted of only 12 colonies spread across 5 star systems. Their ships used fusion drives, technology the Dominion had abandoned 5 centuries ago. Their weapons were kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. By Dominion standards, they were primitives playing at civilization. "We appreciate your interest in joining the galactic community," Velshara said with a thin smile. "However, the Dominion has certain standards for membership. Perhaps in another century or 2, when your technology has advanced sufficiently." Ambassador Martinez nodded slowly. "We understand. We're not asking for membership in the Dominion. We're simply asking to be left alone to develop at our own pace. Recognition of our sovereignty, nothing more." Velshara made a note on her data tablet. The request was reasonable, almost humble. These humans knew their place. The meeting concluded with vague promises of future discussions. Velshara left feeling satisfied. The human problem, if it could even be called that, would resolve itself. Either they would advance and become useful, or they would fade into obscurity like so many other species. But 3 days later, something unexpected happened. A ship arrived at Dominion Central, the massive station that served as the Empire's political heart. The ship was ancient, its hull scarred by centuries of travel. It belonged to the Arzelians, a species that had been old when the Dominion was young. The Arzelians rarely involved themselves in modern politics. They observed, they recorded, and they kept to themselves in their handful of remaining worlds. Elder Koth came before the Dominion Council. He was a tall, thin creature with 4 arms and skin like polished stone. His eyes held the weight of centuries. The council members whispered among themselves, curious about why an Arzelian would break his people's long silence. "Honored Council," Elder Koth began, his voice like wind through caves. "I come to speak about the humans." Grand Admiral Threxion, a powerful member of the council, leaned forward. He was a Quenter like Velshara, with scales that gleamed purple under the chamber lights. "The primitives from the Outer Rim? What about them?" "I have studied them for 70 of their years," Elder Koth said. "My people have watched their world from a distance, observing their development. I come to offer a warning. Do not underestimate them. Do not threaten them. And above all, do not make them desperate." The council chamber filled with the sound of laughter. Councillor Brakener, his tentacles waving in amusement, spoke up. "Elder, with all due respect, the humans have 12 colonies and outdated technology. They pose no threat to the Dominion." "You misunderstand the nature of threat," Elder Koth replied calmly. "The humans come from a death world. Their planet tried to kill them for millions of years. They survived ice ages that should have ended them. They survived predators that hunted them. They survived diseases that killed millions. And when their world ran out of ways to kill them, they started killing each other." The laughter faded. Elder Koth activated a holographic display. Images filled the chamber, showing human history. Cities burning. Mushroom clouds rising into the sky. Trenches filled with botas. Humans in primitive armor stabbing each other with metal spears. Humans in modern gear shooting each other with automatic weapons. "They have fought thousands of wars on their own planet," Elder Koth continued. "They have created weapons designed to kill millions in seconds. They split atoms and turned them into bombs. They created diseases and turned them into weapons. They even weaponized their own genetics, creating soldiers who felt no pain and feared no death. This is what they did to themselves. Imagine what they will do to enemies. Grand Admiral Threxion waved a clawed hand dismissively. Ancient history. Many species had violent pasts. The humans have been peaceful for decades now. They've moved beyond such barbarism. Have they? Elder Koth asked. He showed more images. Human children playing games that simulated war. Human entertainment filled with stories of conflict and survival. Human sports where they fought each other for recreation. Violence is woven into their culture. They celebrate it, study it, and prepare for it even in times of peace. Every human child learns their world's military history. They remember every war, every battle, every sacrifice. This proves nothing, Counselor Brakener said. They're simply a violent species that has learned to control their impulses. The Dominion has dealt with such species before. Elder Koth's ancient eyes swept across the council. You have dealt with species that became violent when threatened. You have never dealt with a species that views violence as a tool, a science, and an art form. Humans do not fight because they must. They fight because they have learned that the universe is hostile and only the adaptable survive. Then we should eliminate them now, Grand Admiral Threxion said, standing from his seat, before they become a real threat. A preemptive strike while they're still weak? That would be the worst possible choice, Elder Koth warned. Because then they will know the universe is exactly as hostile as they always suspected, and they will respond accordingly. But the council had already made up their minds. Grand Admiral Threxion addressed the assembly. The humans occupy valuable territory near the Deneb cluster. Their systems contain resources we need for expansion. We offered them a chance to join peacefully. They refused. I propose we issue an ultimatum. Submit to Dominion authority or face military consequences. The vote was called. Of the 50 council members, 43 voted in favor of the ultimatum. Only 7 abstained and none voted against. Elder Koth watched in silence as the decision was made. You were warned, he said quietly, and left the chamber. The ultimatum was transmitted to human space 3 days later. It was clear and direct. Humanity had 2 weeks to accept Dominion governance or face the consequences. The message reached Earth, Mars, the colonies of Alpha Centauri, and all the scattered settlements where humans had planted their flags. Ambassador Martinez received the message in her office on Earth. She read it 3 times, her face expressionless. Then she picked up her communication device and made a call. Mr. President, they rejected our request. They're demanding submission. The response came quickly. And then we have no choice. Activate Protocol Sentinel. Alert all colonies and military installations. And somebody find me the Secretary of Defense. We have 2 weeks to prepare for war. Across human space, the machine of war began to move. Factories that made civilian goods retooled for military production. Shipyards that built cargo vessels started welding weapons onto hulls. Scientists who studied peaceful applications of technology redirected their knowledge toward destruction. And in 1,000 meeting rooms, military planners began to work. The Dominion had given humanity a choice. Submit or fight. They assumed humanity would choose submission. They were wrong. Humanity chose the third option, the one the Dominion never considered. Humanity chose to make them regret asking the question. The Dominion's Third Fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the new Britannia system. 200 warships materialized in perfect formation, their shields glowing with contained energy. The fleet was a display of overwhelming force, designed to make any rational species surrender immediately. Grand Admiral Threxion stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory. The ship was 5 kilometers long, armed with plasma cannons that could melt a planet's crust. Around him, his officers worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. This was supposed to be a simple mission. Show up, demand surrender, accept submission, and move on to the next human colony. Scan the system, Threxion ordered. His sensor officer worked quickly. Sir, detecting the human colony on the third planet. Population approximately 50 million. Orbital defenses are minimal. I'm reading 20 defense platforms and perhaps 30 combat vessels. Their technology registers as primitive kinetic weapons and chemical propulsion. Threxion nodded. It was exactly as intelligence had predicted. The humans were outmatched by a factor of at least 10 to 1. Open a communication channel to the colony. The view screen flickered to life, showing a human woman in a military uniform. She had gray hair and tired eyes. This is Governor Chun of New Britannia. I suppose you're here to conquer us. Conquest is such an ugly word, Threxion replied smoothly. We are here to bring you into the Dominion. Surrender now, and your people will be spared. Resist, and we will be forced to use military action. Governor Chun was quiet for a moment. We received your ultimatum 2 weeks ago. We've been preparing since then. We knew you would come. Then resistance is futile. Look at your scanners. You are completely outmatched. Yes, Governor Chun agreed. We are, but that doesn't mean we're going to surrender. My people voted yesterday. 97% chose to fight. So I guess we'll see you in battle, Admiral. The communication cut off. Threxion stared at the blank screen in surprise. They actually planned to fight? With their primitive weapons against Dominion warships? It was suicide. Perhaps they didn't understand the gap in technology. Perhaps they thought their desperation would somehow make a difference. Sir, human vessels are launching from the colony, the sensor officer reported. All 30 combat ships are heading toward us. Defense platforms are powering up weapons. Maintain formation, Threxion ordered. Let them come. Deploy shields at maximum. We'll let them exhaust their ammunition, then demand surrender again. The human ships approached at sublight speed. They were ugly things compared to Dominion vessels. Blocky and asymmetrical, with weapons welded to their hulls in ways that seemed almost random. They moved in a loose formation, spreading out as they accelerated toward the Dominion fleet. They're opening fire, the weapons officer announced. Kinetic projectiles and chemical missiles incoming. The human weapons struck the Dominion shields and bounced off harmlessly. The energy barriers absorbed the impacts with ease. Threxion watched the display with satisfaction. This was going exactly as expected. The humans would expend their ammunition, realize the futility of resistance, and surrender, but then something strange happened. The human ships didn't retreat. Instead, they split into smaller groups and began moving in unpredictable patterns. They dodged and weaved, never holding a steady course for more than a few seconds. They used debris from their own weapons as cover, hiding behind clouds of shrapnel to mask their movements. Sir, they're coordinating in ways our combat computers didn't predict, the tactical officer said, a note of concern in his voice. They're using irregular attack patterns. Our targeting systems are having difficulty locking on. Then fire anyway, Threxion snapped. We have 200 ships. They have 30. Simple mathematics. The Dominion fleet opened fire. Plasma bolts streaked through space, each one carrying enough energy to vaporize a small building. But the human ships were small and fast, and most of the shots missed. When the plasma bolts did connect, human vessels died in bursts of fire and metal. Within 10 minutes, half the human fleet was destroyed, but the survivors kept fighting. And that was when Threxion realized something was wrong. The damaged human ships weren't retreating. They were accelerating toward the Dominion fleet. Sir, 3 heavily damaged human vessels are on collision course with our formation. They're not responding to hails. Destroy them before they reach us. The Dominion ships targeted the approaching vessels and fired. 2 exploded before reaching the fleet. But the third ship, trailing fire and atmosphere, slammed into a Dominion cruiser at full speed. The impact tore through the cruiser's shields and crumpled its hull. Both ships exploded in a ball of superheated gas. They're using kamikaze tactics? Someone shouted from across the bridge. Threxion felt a chill run through his scales. He had read about such tactics in ancient military histories, but no modern species fought this way. It was wasteful. It was insane. It was effective. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Target incoming human vessels at maximum range. But the humans adapted again. The remaining ships broke off their attack and retreated toward the colony. Threxion assumed they were running, but his sensor officer soon corrected him. "Sir, the defense platforms are firing." "Not at us. They're targeting the human ships." "What? Why would they fire on their own forces?" The answer became clear moments later. The defense platforms were launching their own ammunition at the retreating human ships, which caught the projectiles and redirected them toward the Dominion fleet at even higher velocities. The humans were using their own defenses as a slingshot. "Clever," Threxion admitted grudgingly, "but not clever enough. Order all ships to advance. We'll destroy the platforms and the remaining ships, then force the colony to surrender." The Dominion fleet moved forward. The remaining human ships made one final desperate attack, firing every weapon they had until their ammunition was exhausted. Then they did something that froze Threxion's blood. They broadcast a message on all frequencies. For Earth, for humanity, for those who come after us. And then every surviving human ship accelerated to maximum speed and rammed the Dominion formation. The collisions destroyed 15 more Dominion vessels. "Madness," Threxion whispered. "They're all mad." But the battle wasn't over. As the Dominion fleet approached the colony itself, Governor Chun appeared on the view screen again. Her face was calm. "Admiral, I'm giving you one last chance to withdraw. Leave now, and no more of your people need to die." "You've lost your entire fleet," Threxion said. "You have nothing left to fight with, don't I?" Governor Chun smiled sadly. "You're about to find out what desperate humans are capable of. This colony has 50 million people. Every single one of them voted to fight. You think those 30 ships were all we had? You're about to learn the difference between a military and an armed population." Hundreds of signals appeared on the Dominion sensors. Ships were launching from all over the planet. Not warships. Civilian vessels. Cargo haulers with crude weapons welded to their hulls. Mining ships that released clouds of metallic dust to blind sensors. Passenger transports packed with explosives. Even a generation ship, a massive vessel designed to carry colonists between stars, was moving toward the Dominion fleet. "They've weaponized everything," the tactical officer said in disbelief. "Every ship, every station, every piece of orbital infrastructure. It's all become part of their defense." The battle turned into chaos. The civilian ships attacked with suicidal determination. They couldn't win, but they could make the Dominion pay for every meter of space. When their weapons ran out, they rammed. When they were boarded, the human crews detonated their own power cores. Fighting in space became fighting on stations, which became fighting in the colony streets. And then Governor Chun played her final card. She transmitted a single command to the colony's main fusion reactor complex. "If we can't have New Britannia," she broadcast to the Dominion fleet, "neither can you." The reactors detonated. The explosion consumed the colony and reached out into orbit, catching Dominion ships that had moved too close. The electromagnetic pulse disabled systems across the fleet. And in the chaos, the generation ship completed its final approach. "Sir, that civilian vessel is still incoming. It's accelerating to 0.3 light speed. Impact in 20 seconds. Destroy it! All weapons fire." The Dominion fleet concentrated fire on the generation ship, tearing it apart. But momentum didn't care about damage. The massive vessel, now just a cloud of debris and expanding plasma, slammed into the Eternal Victory and 3 other capital ships. The impacts tore through shields and armor, gutting the vessels. When the battle finally ended, New Britannia was gone. The colony was a radioactive wasteland. But the Dominion Third Fleet had lost 82 ships, with dozens more damaged beyond immediate repair. They had won, technically. They had destroyed the human forces and eliminated the colony, but as Threxion stood on his ruined bridge, emergency lights casting red shadows across the walls, he realized something terrifying. The humans had made them pay more for this one colony than the Dominion had lost in the last 3 major campaigns combined. And there were 11 more human colonies to conquer. The Dominion Council chamber was silent as Grand Admiral Threxion delivered his report. The holographic display showed the battle statistics from New Britannia, and the numbers were shocking. 82 ships destroyed, 57 damaged, over 30,000 Dominion military personnel dead, all to conquer a single primitive colony. "This is unacceptable," Councillor Brakener said, his tentacles coiling in agitation. "How did primitives with outdated weapons cause such damage?" Threxion's voice was steady, but his scales had lost some of their luster. "They fought without regard for military convention or their own survival. They weaponized civilian vessels. They used suicide tactics. And they destroyed their own colony rather than let us take it intact. Then they must be punished for their defiance," another counselor declared. "We must show them that resistance is futile." The council voted to escalate the conflict. The 5th and 7th fleets would be deployed, nearly 500 ships in total. This time, they wouldn't target colonies. They would strike at Earth itself, the human homeworld, cut off the head, and the body would die. But while the Dominion prepared its fleets, humanity was preparing too. The destruction of New Britannia had sent a message through human space, not of fear, but of fury. Every human colony, every station, every ship received the same broadcast. Governor Chun's final words, recorded before she triggered the reactor detonation. "They came to conquer us. They thought we would surrender because we were outnumbered. They were wrong. We are humans. We don't surrender. We fight. And if we must die, we'll take as many of them with us as we can. Tell Earth, tell the colonies. Make them pay for every human life. Make them regret ever finding us." The message spread like fire. On Earth, the nations that had spent decades reducing their military forces suddenly reversed course. Factories that made cars and computers retooled overnight to produce weapons and ships. Orbital shipyards that built 1 vessel per month now launched 1 per day. Scientists and engineers who had spent their careers on peaceful research redirected their knowledge toward war. But humanity did something else, something the Dominion didn't expect. They got creative. Human warfare had evolved over thousands of years, and humans had learned to turn anything into a weapon. They took that knowledge and applied it to space combat. Dr. Sarah Kim stood in a laboratory deep beneath the Earth's surface, looking at her team's latest creation. It was a missile, but not like any missile the Dominion had ever seen. The warhead contained a nuclear bomb, but the bomb wasn't the weapon. The bomb's purpose was to pump energy into a laser array, creating a single pulse of coherent light powerful enough to cut through Dominion shields. "Will it work?" General Martinez asked. He was the brother of Ambassador Martinez, and his hair had gone completely gray in the 3 weeks since New Britannia. "In theory," Dr. Kim replied. "We're taking the principle of nuclear bombs and redirecting the energy. 1 shot, but it should penetrate their shields before they can adapt. And the other projects? Relativistic kill missiles are ready. We accelerate a solid projectile to near light speed and let physics do the rest. Micro-drone swarms are in production. Each drone is barely larger than an insect, but in groups of millions they can tear through hull armor. And the AI guidance systems are learning Dominion tactics from the New Britannia data." General Martinez nodded. "What about the unconventional weapons?" Dr. Kim's expression darkened. "The biological weapons are ready, but Sarah, those things are monstrous. Genetic plagues designed to target Dominion species specifically. If we use them, we're crossing a line humanity swore we'd never cross again." "The Dominion crossed that line when they destroyed New Britannia?" General Martinez said coldly. 50 million dead. Men, women, children. They murdered them all. So yes, we'll use every weapon we have. Because this isn't about honor anymore. It's about survival." Across human space, similar conversations were happening. In the asteroid belt, mining companies were hollowing out rocks and filling them with weapons, creating hidden fortresses. On Mars, engineers were building autonomous defense satellites that could think and adapt on their own. In the outer colonies, volunteers were signing up for missions that had no chance of survival but might slow the Dominion advance by hours or days. And Earth itself became a fortress. The planet had never been militarized to this extent, not even during humanity's worst wars. Every major city had orbital defense platforms. The moon was covered in weapon emplacements. Space stations ringed the planet in layers, each one prepared to fight and die to protect the world below. When the Dominion fleets arrived at Saturn, they found humanity waiting for them. The human fleet that emerged from behind Saturn's rings was 3 times larger than Dominion intelligence had predicted. Over 900 vessels, ranging from massive battleships to tiny fighters. Many were converted civilian ships, but many others were new designs, built specifically to fight the Dominion. Admiral Threxion stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. How? How did they build so many ships in less than 2 months? His intelligence officer pulled up data files. Sir, it appears every human nation, corporation, and colony contributed resources. They've converted their entire economy to war production. Every ship that can fly has been armed. Every factory is making weapons. Every human is now part of their war effort. Then they've doomed themselves, Threxion said. They've sacrificed their future for a temporary military buildup. After we defeat them, their economy will collapse. Assuming we defeat them, sir. Threxion turned to glare at his officer, but before he could respond, the human fleet attacked. And immediately, everything went wrong. The humans didn't fight like they had at New Britannia. They had learned. They had adapted. Their ships moved in coordinated formations, using tactics that seemed to predict Dominion responses. When the Dominion fleet tried to concentrate fire, the humans scattered. When the Dominion scattered to avoid kamikaze attacks, the humans concentrated their fire on isolated ships, and their weapons were different. The nuclear-pumped lasers cut through shields that should have been impenetrable. The relativistic missiles moved too fast to intercept, striking with the force of small nuclear bombs. The drone swarms surrounded Dominion vessels like clouds of insects, chewing through armor and disabling weapons. Sir, they're jamming our communications, the communications officer reported. I can't establish a secure channel to the rest of the fleet. Switch to backup frequencies. Already tried? They're jamming those too. It's like they know our entire communication protocol. They did know. Because 3 weeks earlier, a human infiltration team had captured a damaged Dominion scout ship at New Britannia. They had taken the ship's computer core and spent every available moment studying it. They had learned the Dominion's codes, their tactics, their standard operating procedures. And now they were using that knowledge to tear the fleet apart. The battle raged for 3 weeks. It was the largest space battle in Dominion history, and it was like nothing they had ever experienced. The humans employed psychological warfare, broadcasting recordings of dying Dominion soldiers on all frequencies. They hacked into Dominion systems and displayed propaganda on ship monitors. They even sent messages to individual Dominion officers, addressing them by name and describing their families back home. "Attention, Captain Velcris of the Dominion cruiser Resolute," a calm human voice said over a hacked channel. "We know you have a mate and 3 offspring on Quenter Prime. We know your eldest child just started military academy. Do you really want to die here, fighting someone else's war?" The psychological attacks didn't cause mass desertions, but they created doubt. They made Dominion soldiers hesitate. And in space combat, hesitation was death. On the 13th day of battle, a Dominion commander named Subadmiral Krivak made a desperate decision. His ship was surrounded by human drones, his weapons were depleted, and his hull was breached in 17 places. He opened a communication channel to the nearest human vessel. "I surrender. My crew surrenders. Please, just let us evacuate." There was a pause. Then a human voice responded. "Acknowledge. Power down your weapons and transmit your crew roster. We'll send rescue ships." Krivak couldn't believe it. The humans were actually going to let them surrender? After everything that had happened? He gave the orders and his crew powered down their systems. True to their word, human rescue ships approached and began evacuating the Dominion survivors. But when Kravok was brought aboard the human ship, the captain explained something that chilled him. "We're accepting surrenders because we want your people to know they have a choice. Fight and die or surrender and live. We're not monsters, Sub-Admiral. We're just people who've been backed into a corner." Word of the surrenders spread through the Dominion fleet. More ships began to consider the option. And that was when Threxion made a fatal mistake. He ordered that any ship attempting to surrender would be destroyed by the Dominion fleet itself. To prevent defections, the order was meant to strengthen resolve. Instead, it broke morale. Dominion soldiers realized their own commanders valued pride over their lives. When the human fleet launched its next major offensive, dozens of Dominion ships simply powered down their weapons and waited for human rescue. Grand Admiral Threxion stood in the council chamber, but this time he was not delivering a report. He was being questioned, and the questions were not friendly. The council members sat in their elevated seats, looking down at him with expressions ranging from anger to disgust. "You lost 312 ships," Councillor Brakener stated. "Nearly 40% of the combined fleet. This is the worst military disaster in Dominion history." "The humans fought with unprecedented tactics," Threxion replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "They used weapons we had never encountered. They adapted faster than our combat doctrine could compensate." "Excuses," another counselor spat. "You had 500 ships against a primitive species. You should have won in days, not retreated in weeks." Threxion felt his pride burning. They didn't understand. They hadn't been there. They hadn't seen the way humans fought, as if death meant nothing to them. But he couldn't argue with the council. Instead, he made a proposal that would haunt him forever. "Give me one more chance," he said. "Let me show these humans what happens when they defy the Dominion. I request permission to use orbital bombardment on Earth's major population centers. Break their spirit and they'll surrender." The chamber fell silent. Orbital bombardment of civilian targets was technically legal under Dominion military law, but it was rarely used. It was considered brutal, excessive, and generally counterproductive. Destroyed populations couldn't pay taxes or provide resources, but the council was angry. They had lost ships, personnel, and face. Other species in the Dominion were watching, wondering if the Empire was truly as powerful as it claimed. The council voted, and the motion passed by a narrow margin. Threxion had permission to break humanity's will by any means necessary. 3 days later, the Dominion 8th Fleet arrived in Earth's solar system. This time, they didn't engage the human fleet. Instead, they moved into high orbit above Earth and targeted the planet's major cities. Beijing, New York, Lagos, Mumbai, Sao Paulo, Cairo. The bombardment was precise and devastating. Plasma bolts struck from orbit, each one carrying the energy of a small nuclear weapon. Millions died in the first hour. Billions more huddled in shelters, listening to the explosions above. The bombardment continued for 6 hours before Threxion broadcast a message to the human government. "This is Grand Admiral Threxion of the Galactic Dominion. You have seen what we can do. Surrender now, or we will continue until your entire planet is lifeless rock. You have 12 hours to respond." The human government's response came in less than 1 hour. It was a single word broadcast from every remaining transmitter on Earth. Every ship, every station, every human settlement across the colonies. No, but something else happened. Something Threxion didn't learn about until it was too late. The orbital bombardment didn't break human spirit. It radicalized them. Every human who had been reluctant about the war, every person who had hoped for peace, every voice calling for negotiation fell silent. They had seen their cities burn. They had lost families, friends, and homes. And they wanted revenge. In offices and laboratories across human space, scientists who had refused to work on the most terrible weapons changed their minds. The biological weapons were released from containment. The genetic plagues, designed to target Dominion species, were loaded onto missiles. The nanite weapons, which could disassemble matter at the molecular level, were activated. and thousands of human volunteers signed up for operations that guaranteed death. But the most devastating response came from an unexpected place. Deep in the Dominion's own territory, on worlds conquered generations ago, human immigrant workers had been living quietly for decades. They were traders, technicians, teachers, and laborers. The Dominion had never considered them a threat. They were wrong. The humans on Dominion worlds had been listening to the news from Earth. They had heard about New Britannia. They had heard about the orbital bombardment. And they had been waiting for a signal. When the word "no" was broadcast across the galaxy, they knew it was time to act. On 73 different Dominion worlds, human sleeper cells activated simultaneously. They sabotaged power plants, destroyed supply depots, and released computer viruses into military networks. But more importantly, they released the biological weapons. The genetic plague spread through Dominion population centers, tailored to affect only Dominion species. The diseases weren't immediately fatal, but they were terrifying. Fevers, hallucinations, paralysis. Dominion citizens who had never even seen a human suddenly found themselves fighting invisible human weapons. The panic was immediate. Dominion worlds went into quarantine. Trade routes closed. Military supply lines collapsed. And the Dominion Council realized they had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They had thought humanity was confined to their small territory. They hadn't realized that humans had been spreading quietly through Dominion space for decades. Preparing for a day like this, Elder Koth of the Arzelians contacted Grand Admiral Phyrexion directly, bypassing the council. The ancient being's face appeared on Phyrexion's private view screen, and his expression was sad. "I warned you," Koth said simply. "I told you not to make them desperate. But you bombed their cities. You killed their children. You showed them that you were willing to commit genocide. And now they're responding the only way they know how. They're using biological weapons," Phyrexion said, his voice hollow. "They've weaponized diseases. They've deployed agents across our space. These are war crimes." "War crimes?" Koth's voice was gentle but firm. "You bombarded civilian population centers from orbit. You destroyed an entire colony. You started this spiral, Admiral. The humans are simply finishing it. But the diseases, the sabotage, the attacks on civilians, this isn't how civilized species fight." "No," Koth agreed. "This is how desperate species fight. This is how cornered animals fight. This is how creatures who believe they're facing extinction fight. You made them believe the only options were total victory or total death. So they chose victory by any means necessary." Phyrexion closed the communication channel. He stood alone on his bridge, looking at the tactical displays showing chaos across Dominion space. The Eighth Fleet was still in Earth's orbit, but he had lost control of the situation. His superiors were screaming for answers. Dominion worlds were demanding protection. And the human fleet was preparing another attack, but Earth wasn't finished with its response. The human government broadcast another message, this one directly to the Dominion people on all their worlds. "People of the Galactic Dominion, we are the humans you tried to destroy. Your leaders bombed our cities and killed our families. But we don't blame you. We blame them. Your leaders started this war, not us. We offered peace, and they chose violence. So we're giving you a choice. Demand that your leaders negotiate for peace, or watch as this war consumes your civilization along with ours. The diseases spreading through your worlds, we have the cure, and we'll share it freely once peace is declared. The sabotage and chaos? It will stop when the bombing stops. You have the power to end this. Use it." The message was clever, and it worked. On dozens of Dominion worlds, protests erupted. Citizens demanded that their leaders end the war. They didn't want to die from human diseases. They didn't want their supply lines disrupted. They didn't want to keep fighting an enemy that refused to surrender, and then humanity played its final card. On the edges of Dominion space, in systems the Empire had conquered centuries ago, rebellions began. Species that had been subjugated for generations suddenly saw hope. If humans could fight back against the Dominion, maybe they could too. The humans provided weapons, intelligence, and support to the rebels. Nothing major, just enough to keep the Dominion distracted. The Dominion Council convened an emergency session. Councillor Brakener addressed the assembly with tentacles drooping in exhaustion. We're facing rebellions on 16 worlds. Our supply lines are compromised. Our citizens are demanding peace. And the humans show no signs of surrendering despite the bombardment. I move that we reconsider our strategy. What are you suggesting? Another councillor demanded. That we admit defeat to a species we outnumber 1,000 to 1? I'm suggesting we recognize reality, Brakener replied. We can't conquer them. Every time we hurt them, they hurt us back worse. They're turning our own size against us, using our interconnected systems as a weakness. If this war continues, it won't just cost us our military. It will cost us our entire civilization. Grand Admiral Threxion received new orders 3 days later. The Council had made its decision. The Eighth Fleet was to cease bombardment and withdraw from Earth's solar system. The Dominion was requesting peace negotiations. They didn't call it a surrender, but everyone knew what it was. Threxion stood on his bridge and gave the order to cease fire. As his fleet began its retreat, he watched Earth on the viewscreen. The planet was scarred and burning, but still alive. Still fighting. Still refusing to surrender. They won, he said quietly to himself. A primitive species with inferior technology outnumbered thousands to 1, and they won. Not because they were stronger, but because they were willing to do anything to survive. His second officer approached. Sir, the humans are broadcasting again. Threxion activated the communication. A human face appeared, someone he didn't recognize. The peace negotiations took place on the ruins of New Britannia. The choice of location was intentional, a reminder to the Dominion of where this war had begun. Temporary habitats had been constructed on the dead world's surface, and representatives from both sides gathered under the gray sky. Secretary General Chun arrived with a small delegation. She was 40 years old, and her hair had gone white during the 6 months of war. She had been a kindergarten teacher before her mother's death, someone who taught children their letters and numbers. Now she was the voice of humanity, negotiating with an empire that spanned 10,000 star systems. Grand Admiral Threxion led the Dominion delegation. His scales had lost their shine, and he moved like someone carrying a great weight. Elder Koth was also present, not as a negotiator but as an observer. The ancient Arzelian sat quietly, watching the proceedings with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. The negotiations began formally. Diplomats from both sides presented their positions, speaking in careful language about terms and conditions. But after 3 hours of diplomatic language, Qin stood up and spoke plainly. Let's stop pretending this is a normal peace treaty, she said. You attacked us. We defended ourselves. You escalated. We escalated harder. Now you want peace because the war is costing you more than conquest would gain you. So let's be honest about what's really happening here. Threxion's translator rendered his response with perfect accuracy. What are you proposing? Full recognition of human sovereignty over all our current territory, plus any systems we colonize in the future. Reparations for New Britannia and the orbital. Bombardment of Earth, full technology exchange, so we're not at a disadvantage in future interactions. And a mutual defense pact. A defense pact? Councillor Brakener made a sound like water gurgling. You want us to defend you after we just finished fighting you? Not defend us, Chin clarified. Defend against us. Or rather, defend against the fear of us. Because here's what we've learned from this war. The galaxy is dangerous. Species conquer each other. The strong dominate the weak. And we never want to be weak again. So we're going to keep building weapons. We're going to keep advancing our military technology. We're going to keep preparing for war. But we'll promise never to use those weapons against the Dominion or any of your allies. As long as you promise never to attack us again, you're asking us to accept an armed threat on our borders, Threxion said. We're already an armed threat, Chun replied calmly. The only question is whether we're an enemy or an ally. We're offering you the chance to choose. The Dominion delegation requested a recess to discuss privately. They gathered in their habitat module, arguing in hushed voices. Finally, Threxion made a decision. We accept the basic framework, he announced when negotiations resumed. But we need guarantees. How do we know you won't use your weapons against us in the future? Chun smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. That's where my final proposal comes in. We call it mutually assured destruction. It's a concept from our history, from a time when we had the power to destroy ourselves. She activated a holographic display. It showed the galaxy with thousands of points highlighted in red. Over the past 6 months, humanity has constructed approximately 10,000 relativistic kill missiles. Each one is basically a very dense object accelerated to 90% of light speed. They're currently hidden in deep space, scattered throughout the galaxy. Many of them are aimed at your major worlds. The Dominion delegates stared in horror. You're threatening to destroy our planets? No, Chun said. I'm explaining our insurance policy. These missiles are on dead man switches. They require a specific signal from human command to remain dormant. If humanity is ever destroyed, if our government falls, if we lose the ability to send that signal, the missiles launch automatically. They're programmed to target the worlds of whoever destroyed us. That's insane, Breakener said. You've created doomsday weapons. Yes, Chun agreed. Just like we created nuclear weapons, biological plagues, and nanite swarms. Because we learned a long time ago that the only thing that stops powerful people from attacking weaker ones is fear. You feared we would be a threat someday, so you attacked us while we were weak. Now we've made sure that destroying us would also destroy you. So you'll never try it again. Threxion felt something cold in his stomach. You've turned your entire species into a hostage situation. We've ensured our survival, Chun corrected. This is the only way we can trust you. Not because you're honorable or peaceful, but because attacking us would be suicide. That's what Elder Koth tried to tell you. We're not like other species. We don't trust in honor or diplomacy or the goodness of others. We trust in deterrence. We trust in making ourselves too dangerous to attack. Elder Koth spoke for the first time. It is the way of death worlds. Species from harsh environments learn that survival requires being more trouble than you're worth. The humans have simply applied that lesson on a galactic scale. The negotiations continued for 3 more days, hammering out details. The final treaty included everything Chen had demanded, plus some concessions from humanity. They agreed to share the cure for the biological weapons they had released. They agreed to help rebuild Dominion worlds damaged by sabotage. They agreed to limits on certain weapon systems, as long as those limits applied to the Dominion as well, but the core of the treaty was the mutual deterrence. The Dominion would leave humanity alone. Humanity would leave the Dominion alone. Both sides would maintain their weapons and their vigilance, but neither would attack first. It was peace built not on trust but on fear. On the final day of negotiations, Threxion found himself alone with Chen in one of the observation domes. They looked out at the ruins of New Britannia through the clear panels. Why are you like this? Threxion asked. It was the question that had haunted him since the first battle. Why do you fight this way? Why are you so willing to destroy yourselves to hurt your enemies? Chun was quiet for a long moment. Do you know what Earth was like before we civilized it? Every other predator was faster than us, stronger than us, better armed than us. We should have died out. But we didn't because we learned to use tools. We learned to cooperate. We learned to plan and adapt and never give up. She pointed at the gray landscape outside. For 3 million years, Earth tried to kill us. Ice ages froze us. Diseases infected us. Predators hunted us. Volcanoes buried us. And when the planet ran out of ways to kill us, we started killing each other. Wars, genocides, nuclear weapons. We did terrible things to our own species. That doesn't answer my question, Threxion said. Yes, it does, Chun replied. We survived because we learned that nothing in the universe cares if we live or die. Not nature, Not gods. Not other species. The universe is hostile, and mercy is something you have to create yourself. So we don't trust in mercy. We don't trust in honor. We trust in strength and deterrence and the willingness to do whatever it takes to survive. That's a bleak philosophy. It's a realistic one, Chun said. You called us primitives. You thought we would be easy to conquer? But you made a mistake. You confused primitive technology with primitive thinking. Our technology was centuries behind yours, yes. But our understanding of conflict and survival? That's been honed over millions of years of barely staying alive on a planet that tried to kill us. She turned to face him directly. You were warned. Elder Koth told you not to make us desperate. But you didn't listen. You thought desperation made us weak. You didn't understand that desperation makes us dangerous because when you have nothing left to lose, you can do anything. Anything at all. Threxion met her eyes. They were the eyes of a former teacher, someone who had once devoted her life to helping children learn. But they were also the eyes of someone who had authorized biological weapons and orbital bombardment responses. Someone who had turned an entire species into a doomsday device. I understand now, he said quietly. Your species survived by becoming the thing that other species fear? Yes, Chun agreed. And now the galaxy knows it. Which means maybe, just maybe, we can finally stop surviving and start living. Because nobody will dare attack us again. The treaty was signed the next day. Official delegations from both sides put their marks on the document and peace was declared. The war had lasted 6 months and 2 days. The Dominion had lost over 900 ships and suffered rebellions on 16 worlds. Humanity had lost New Britannia, seen Earth scarred by orbital bombardment, and sacrificed millions of lives. But humanity survived. And more than that, humanity had earned something precious: respect. Not the respect of equals or friends, but the respect given to dangerous things. The Dominion and other galactic powers would watch humanity carefully from now on. But they would watch from a distance. Elder Koth delivered one final message to the Galactic Council before returning to his people's isolated worlds. Humanity is now a member of the galactic community. I suggest you remember 3 lessons from this war. First, do not underestimate species from death worlds. Second, do not confuse technological disadvantage with weakness. And third, never, ever back a human into a corner where they believe they have nothing left to lose. The message was heard across the galaxy, and for the first time in centuries.